Ladies and gentlemen, we'll start with the meeting. I believe we're on time at 5:30. Thank you. Okay. I declare the ordinary council meeting of the 12th of October 2021 held in council chambers of the City of Subiaco open at 5:30 p.m. I welcome councillors, staff, members of the media and members of the community. Welcome to you all. I'm Councillor Stephanie Stroud, your Deputy Mayor, and I'm obviously presiding for the meeting. We've just had an apologies from the Mayor. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge the Wadja Noongar people as the traditional custodians of the area. We recognise their cultural connection to the land and waterways of Subiaco and their continuing contribution to our city. Please note this meeting is being recorded and live streamed. By being present at this meeting, members of the public consent to the possibility that their image and voice may be live streamed to the public. Recordings will be made available following the meeting. Confidential sections of council meetings will not be live streamed or recorded. For attendance and apologies and leave of absence, it looks like we have a full house, with the exception of Councillor Angela Hammersley, who's on a leave of absence, and the apologies from Mayor Taylor. Disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures? Thank you, Councillor Powell.
Thank you. I, Rick Powell, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by the Council at its meeting to be held on the 12th of October 2021, Agenda Item 7.1. The interest which I wish to declare is impartiality pursuant to Clause 22 of the Code of Conduct for Council members, committee members and candidates. The nature of my interest is I am a Council elected representative on the Metro Inner North JDAP and was a member of the panel that heard the application that is the subject of the legal advice. I am also mentioned by name in the Council resolution in regard to this matter. For the public record, I have no financial or other interest in the application or the properties involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Do we have any other disclosures for the evening? Okay, no more. So, moving on to Agenda Item 4, response to previous public questions taken on notice. There are none. The acting... Oh, sorry, this is an old... I think we're all good on the conditions of entry. Thank you. Moving on to Agenda Item 5, public question time. We have Sharon Williams. Would you like to come to the lectern? Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. 2 questions tonight. Could the City please outline when Council approved Councillor Murray Rowe's appointment and the time periods covered for Councillor Rowe's election as the local government representative to the Subiaco Land Redevelopment Committee, or LRC? Please also include the dates and subject of the LRC meetings Councillor Rowe has attended each year. He has represented Council on the LRC. Second question. Back on the 20th of July 2021, OCMI asked the following question. Many in the community are concerned Mueller Park will also be compromised and or built over at some point in time if the redevelopment goes ahead with its WA firsts. These WA firsts include and rely on the sale of huge chunks of our over 100-year-old reserve. Legitimate public concerns were tested by a Department of Local Government Sport and Cultural Industries Director, Mr McMile, who on October 10th, 2018, posed a question on activating Mueller Park for recreational purposes to what was a Chatham House Rules Subi East Precinct Liaison Committee. In reply, the Mayor advised the committee, and I quote, at the recent heritage meeting for the project, Mueller Park was given a Category 1 or 2 reserve, therefore a lot of protection around this park, so it would be difficult to use this park for active uses in the next 15 or so years, end quote. Thus, Mueller Park is also under threat and could be repurposed or even sold off like huge chunks of our recreational reserve in 15 years or less. Given this as the spokesman of Council's adopted position, will the Mayor please explain why any time frame would make any difference and why the Mayor didn't take this opportunity to rule out and speak out against any threat to Muir Park's current use? Unfortunately, I've not received an answer from the Mayor, nor has an answer been recorded in the minutes on a question that was tabled and taken on notice nearly 3 months ago. Could an answer be provided as part of the public record? Thank you.
Thank you. And the Acting Director of Community Development Services will provide you with an answer. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Presiding Member. In response to your first question about the Land Redevelopment Committee, the Minister responsible for redevelopment areas writes to the City requesting 3 people be nominated by the local government to be considered for selection on the land to the Land Redevelopment Committee. At its February 2019 Council meeting, elected members McAllister, Murray and Rowe were nominated by Council for appointment to the Subiaco Land Redevelopment Committee, and following that, Council Rowe was appointed by the Minister, who is responsible for that appointment and also the length of the term. Development WA administers the Land Redevelopment Committee and its meetings, and nominations for the appointment to the Land Redevelopment Committee will follow the same process, and it is intended to be considered at the next Council meeting. In response to your second question, there is no intention to change the current status of Muir Park, which is a Class A reserve and subject to a management order vested with the City of Subiaco. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We now have a question from Helen Leader. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. 2 years ago, I was told my submitted statement thanking the elected members whose 4-year term was completed was disallowed, as it wasn't an agenda item. I won't make that mistake again, but would still like to thank the 2 retiring councillors who weren't present when the Mayor thanked the others last week, but not them. Question 1. May the gallery express its gratitude to Councillor Blake Phelan for his 2 years advocating for Subi East, and to Councillor David McMullen for his 4 years of quiet, effective representation of the South Ward. And my second question, may the gallery also express the community's gratitude to the Deputy Mayor for her considerate, courteous and respectful chairing of what must amount to half of this year's agenda meetings, OCMs and special council meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I think all that will be noted. You made your point, and thank you for your note. And I do recall you not being allowed in the past, so yeah. Thank you. Okay. We now move on to public statement time, and we have Nigel Oakey on behalf of Alex Timokos. Thank you. And this is to do with Sedan Street. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to make this statement. I'm the CEO, Managing Director and co-owner of the Dome Cafe Group. We have until recently had a cafe in continuous operation on Rockaby Road for 26 years. We're a much loved institution in WA. In all likelihood, we've been one of the most enduring retail tenancies in Subiaco. Dome is a unique place where people from all walks of life are provided with a place of welcome and comfort and are treated equally with respect. In July 21, I advised our landlord that having completed our most recent lease obligation of 20 years, that we would be giving notice to vacate the tenancy and cease trading in Subiaco. There are several reasons which have, in our view, conspired towards a situation not just of our closure, but the many tenancies which have shut up before us and now lie vacant, some of them now for years. Perhaps a sign of how things bad are is that I've had landlords in Subiaco who have noted our closure since contacting us and offering us their tenancies, provided we just pay their rates and taxes, which are in of themselves among the highest we experience across our network. The reality is that the decline of Subiaco was long in the making, and it has been enduring for nigh on a decade for a number of reasons. Competition with other precincts during the mining boom, including the CBD, Leederville and Claremont, the draw of Claremont Quarter, the loss of the main stadium and football as a big driver of weekend and nighttime economy, not just the failure, but the actual destructive impact on the permanent retail traders by the weekend Rockaby Road markets, extended impact of various roadwork schemes, and the strongly deleterious impact of partnerships with Wilson Car Parking, which famously for us created the $10 cappuccino. We've concurrently now had the removal of the public car parking deck on what is now the Blackburn site. The consequence of this is when the 4-year WA recession hit from 14 to 18, all of this water was well under the bridge, and Subiaco by that time had nothing left to fight back with. Market rents, from which asset capital values and gross rental values and ultimately LGA rates are derived, start with footfall and vibrancy. In the period from 14 to 19 before COVID hit, weekly footfall, not football, past our front door in Rockaby Road progressively fell by 47%. Now that we're out of lease and numerous other retailers have closed, valuations will inevitably fall, as will rates and income for the city commensurately. I suspect this decline dynamic is somewhat disguised in gross terms right now by rates from new developments, including office, apartment and hotel buildings. These may be keeping the cream on the cake looking pert and attractive, but please understand that it is hiding a hollowing out of the core of what it means to have a vibrant civic heart, with strong emotional connection by its residents and visitors alike to its high street. Rockaby Road is sick and it needs resuscitating. The positive of this is the flip side of the problem is an opportunity. And this is my closing comment. Can I just close? Okay. Sorry, I didn't time this. It's probably going to be 4 minutes. This brings me neatly to Sedan Street. In the very same week that I closed our doors for business thinking it would be the last time, I was contacted by the city's manager for economic development and place. In a face-to-face meeting, he showed me the same documents you have for your consideration here today. I plan to reignite a sense of place in a section of Rockaby Road which frankly was being left to rot. I'd already given notice to my landlord, but on learning the city's plans, I gave them a call. They too were exasperated. They met with the same city officer to learn about the plans. The outcome of all of these discussions is that we now have a situation where if the Sedan Street activation development is committed to by you, then I will agree to a new lease with my landlord and moreover make a commitment to put capital back into that part of Subiaco. My landlord, for their part, will see fit to agree a holdover period where they will receive very little income whilst the Sedan Street works are completed before a new lease with me restarting. In essence, we will all reboot economically together at the end of next year when we hope the Sedan Street works will be completed. This is what you might call a valuable spark to igniting a new flame for Subiaco and its once famous High Street. To the extent that Council has already provisioned the capital in its reserves for this modest project, I would hope you could tonight not only approve the further design works and consultants, but give an expression of conviction as to those works actually proceeding. This is what economic development, placemaking and urban rejuvenation is all about, and I would strongly commend Council for any endorsing of the plan and actually getting it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oakey, and all the best for the future for the Dome as well. We now have a statement from Mary McFarlane. Thank you, Mary, if you'd like to come to the lectern. And it's on C2, the Agenda Briefing Forum and the Ordinary Council meeting dates. Thank you, Mary.
And just a bit else as well. Yes, I thought the dates could be changed to Monday and Friday, if Council saw fit. I'd also like to address the strategic implications for this item. Oh, and before that, I would like to say thank you and good evening to the presiding member and councillors, especially Councillor Nash, for being here. The strategic implications for this item concern council leadership and community engagement, which I would like to link to one word: respect. We in the public gallery are frequently directed to the Code of Conduct for council meetings, are chastised and criticised for daring to...
Excuse me. I don't have a copy of your statement, Mary. Did you submit it? Or?
I did put it in. The first one got rejected
We don't have anything. Debbie's. No, it looks like, I'm sorry, it looks like it was rejected, and I came to this position with only a few minutes warning, so I'm sorry, I haven't had a chance to read your statement or anything, so I'm afraid I'm not going to ask you to return to the chair.
Yeah, it's just that it doesn't, it's not rude or abusive or anything like that. It's just, it relates to item C2. And it just seems that the people don't get a chance, the public don't get a chance sometimes to express our opinion, just like we're doing here.
Yeah. Okay, well, I believe you've made your point there, and certainly we'll consider about the future meeting days and times. Thanks, Mary. Okay, that ends our public statement time. We move on to petitions and approved deputations. Do we have any petitions or approved deputations? No? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 8, confirmation of minutes of previous meetings. Can I please have a mover and seconder for the ordinary council meeting of the 21st of September 2021? Thank you, Councillor Mansfield and Councillor Nash. We'll now put that to the vote. Thank you. Okay, that is with Councillor Rowe. Not yet. Sorry, members of the gallery, we might have a flat battery here. Thank you, Councillor Rose. So that was carried 9-1. Moving on to agenda item 9, announcements by the presiding member. I have 2 announcements this evening. The first is to congratulate the Subiaco football team, the Lions, who roared through to a 2021 premiership. And they defeated the Bulldogs, which is South Fremantle. This is actually their 5th premiership win in 8 seasons, and the city has a congratulatory plaque to present to them. That's all terrific stuff in the sporting world. The second announcement is, in case anybody hadn't noticed, this is the last meeting for Subiaco Council of 2019 to 21. This means that 6 elected members, this is actually their last Subiaco Council meeting. And it also means there are still future prospects of another elected member another elected member, which will be decided on Saturday night. So following on from last week's presiding member announcement, where the service of some councillors were acknowledged, I wish to also acknowledge the 2-year service of Councillor Phelan, and in particular his interest with the Subiaco East redevelopment scheme. After serving a full term on council, Councillor McMullen has decided to contest the mayoral position, and in just 4 days' time we will know the result. I suspect that most around this table and in our community would agree that democracy is at its best when seats are being contested. And a contest also makes our local government life a little bit more interesting. So thank you, Councillor McMullen, for rising to the challenge and all the best with the outcome. Thank you also for your service so far and for your considered and impartial approach to the many issues that have come to this chamber. For everyone departing, all the best for the future. Thank you. That ends that agenda item, and we will move on now to the officer reports. The first one on the agenda is C1, the Sedan Street Public Realm Upgrade Concept Design. Okay, thank you, councillors. I have a possible en bloc motion in front of me, and for the information for the public gallery, it is intended that a number of the recommendations presented to this meeting will be grouped together and passed en bloc, as no amendments or alternative motions have been received from elected members for these recommendations. I now ask the meeting whether there are any agenda items to be withdrawn from en bloc, because the two that are suggested at this stage are C1 and C4. So, councillors, would you like to withdraw any of these items? Well, I'd like to actually withdraw C1, being the Sedan Street Public Realm, and so that means that that leaves C4, and C4 are the financial statements. Is the council in agreement that the financial statements will be moved en bloc? Okay, so can I please have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mansfield, and thank you, Councillor Davis. And it is that item C4 contained in the agenda of the ordinary council meeting of the 12th of October 2021 be adopted en bloc. We'll put that to the vote. Thank you. Councillor Jennings, your vote isn't registered. Thank you. That is passed unanimously. Okay, thank you, councillors. That moves on to C1, the Sedan Street Public Realm Upgrade. Can I have a mover and a seconder for this item? Thank you, Councillor Nash, and thank you, Councillor Mansfield. Councillor Nash, would you like to speak to this item?
Yes, thank you. My experience of the last 4 years on council is that there are certain matters that come before us that are, by their very nature, absolutely pivotal to the future strategic direction, livability and, dare I say, prosperity of Subiaco. Two that come immediately to mind are firstly this council's approval of LPS 5, which has set a course for the foreseeable and indeed long-term future of Subiaco, which is the envy of many, including our immediate neighbours. And secondly, and very relevant to this debate, the approval of the RAR in early 2019 by firstly the endorsement of this council and then ultimately by the decision maker in JDAP of the adjoining 24-storey Blackburn development, now known as Subiaco 1. Like other iconic buildings in Subiaco's past, such as the Subiaco Hotel, the Regal Theatre and our very own and much beloved Subiaco Library, Subiaco 1 will become, I believe, one of these icons and will almost undoubtedly still be standing on the corner of Roberts and Rockaby 100 years from now, long after all of us in this chamber have passed. Some decisions we make will ripple down through the years, and so it is with the Sedan Street Public Realm upgrade. No less because it is an integral and cohesive part of the Subiaco 1 development, but also, as the report states, it will soon create a contemporary space that addresses the broader precinct, connects key facets of the town centre, and have the ability to host events and community activities. In essence, the concept design represents a contemporary public realm treatment that upgrades Sedan Street to a functional, adaptable and attractive urban space for the community. and that formalising this will allow the project to advance to the next phase of detailed design. The report goes on to say that the current condition of Sedan Street is considered poor in terms of dilapidation and amenity, and that capital renewal works have not been undertaken for many years in anticipation of a full upgrade of the site. And I think I'll take this opportunity just to comment on the statement by Mr. Oakey, who made the commitment both from the landlord and the lessee to in relation to the dome, and also his noting that there were areas of the city in this area that needed our urgent attention. As a consequence, in accordance with a council resolution from nearly a year ago now, a heads of agreement has been signed in good faith, and I stress in good faith, between the council and Subiaco 1 to progress the above conditions and establish the process for that to occur. This process is in train, and a yes tonight will continue to move it in the right and proper direction for our city. This once-in-a-lifetime opportunity is now, and what an opportunity it is for Subiaco. Because of the development at Subiaco 1, we are in a unique position where the development, approved by both Council and JDAP, has been conditioned to provide a 50% developer contribution for the full hard and soft landscaping of Sedan Street and to facilitate a market for the site. It's important to note that these conditions are on top of the other works Blackburn is already doing, namely the relocation of the area's transformer compound from immediately in front of the Dome Cafe into a space that they've created for that purpose within Subiaco 1, and the provision of public toilets and market storage and ancillary rooms also within the development. The cost of all of this goes well beyond the 50% contribution that we as a city are also obliged to contribute to the public realm upgrade. As they say, it is a win-win for both parties, but most importantly, for our community, who have been patiently, and as we heard tonight, expectantly, waiting such a long time for this to finally come to fruition. Nearly 14 years since a developer bought the old market site. For those among us who may doubt that where we find ourselves now has not been reached through consensus, it's important to note that this proposal fully aligns with our Strategic Community Plan 2017 to 2027 and with a number of informing strategies that guide the city's development. Within Council itself, the plan has evolved over a period of some 18 months through no less than 4 strategic workshops and a decision of Council. Not to mention other people and businesses currently considering moving to Subiaco, will take the decision we make here tonight as a council as a sign of whether Subiaco will continue the momentum and demonstrable revival of the last 4 years or return us to the bad old days of boarded up sites, deteriorating empty buildings, a culture of saying no and a consequential lack of faith in our city's future. We hold this golden opportunity in our hands. I therefore urge and implore you to not turn your back on it, to support the direction the community has set, to look to the future, to maintain the reputation of Subiaco as a local government and a people that remain true to their word and follow through on their commitments, and vote a resounding yes in support of the Sedan Street public realm upgrade. We owe our community no less.
Thank you, Councillor Nash. Was Councillor Mansfield or second? Thank you. Would you like to speak to the item? Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I'm not sure that I'll be able to add too much more from what Councillor Nash has said, simply, I guess, to endorse his words. We do have a fantastic opportunity at the moment to create a special space down at Sedan Street, which will bring the community together as well as the businesses, within that locality. We have worked on this plan for quite a while, and our community have had the opportunity to provide feedback on the plan as well. I think we've had, at least sort of 4 strategic workshops on it, and we have received community feedback via the Have Your Say portal. So the concept design that has been presented to us and gone through various iterations is now being, or if we pass this motion tonight, it's being set to be endorsed to progress through to a more detailed design and planning sort of stage, which will come before council in future. So yeah, I think this is a great opportunity, and I commend the motion to you.
Thank you, Councillor Mansfield. Are there any other councillors who would like to speak for or against the item, or perhaps have questions about the item?
Just waiting to see if there's anyone going to speak against it. Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Well, it's obviously all been said there, but this is to do with an important node that we're trying to work up. It's one of the nodes that we identified some time ago, many years ago, and as a result of the development next door, is obviously this needs some urgent attention. What we have discussed over the time is that this is not the final plan. It's still subject to fine-tuning and effectively a variation in costing, because I think the meeting that I did meet earlier, when it wasn't seconded, I think there was concerns about costings. I noticed in the financial statements in the report today, it does note that we're getting a contribution, a significant contribution by the developer next door, and possibly further on the other side. So it's particularly interesting, and it's very important that we actually go ahead with this, keep moving with a timing, as noted in the MOU, which was disseminated to everybody the other day, reminds us that we do have an obligation to try and finish this prior to occupancy of the building to consolidate the financial contribution from both parties at the moment. So, as I say, most of this has been said already, but I see this as a particularly interesting site because of the size of it. To have a market on a weekend, that should be enhanced, and I'm hoping the staff do, after the questions I put to them the other day, now commence meetings with Marketeers in joint with the Subiaco 1 owners because of their requirement for power, water, a podium, all that sort of thing. I mean, in doing the development approval on this one, of course, we negotiated toilets to be, to assist in this area as an outdoor area, storage for markets, podiums, whatever. So here we're looking at somewhere that it'll be fantastic to add to our public realm during the week for workers, and there's obviously going to be a lot of workers in the vicinity over the next few years, and also for entertainment. And we talked earlier about the Regal being involved too, and I hope there is some consultation with the Regal operators to actually share the use of a podium. You can bring dancing to it, you could bring a band to it, you could have mini plays done on there as a teaser for a coming event, which was, all this has been discussed over time. So I gather this, and I hope there's no one speaking against it now that I've spoken for it. So let's get on with it, please.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Would anybody else like to speak to the item for or against, or questions? Councillor Powell, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Presiding Officer, presiding member. Look, I still have questions and concerns over Sedan Street, especially how the promised markets will work. But then that is a matter for one Subiaco, as it's a condition of approval. Last week I visited the site once again, and it's not huge, so I'm a bit taken aback at the $2 million indicative price tag. And look, some of my questions and concerns are probably unanswerable until this project proceeds to a more detailed design stage. I am aware, though, that the Council does have a legal agreement with One Subiaco, and time is ticking. I don't think either the City or One Subiaco would like to see a brand new multi-million-dollar development fronting Broken Street. I don't think that would be in anybody's interests. So time is an issue, and so to me is keeping our agreements. So I am going to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Would anybody else like to speak to this item? Okay, I'll move 4.7 and 4.8 just to actually suggest an amendment to the item. My amendment, I'll just give it to staff so they can put it up for me. The reason for this amendment, as council's well aware, a heads of agreement was signed. Our CEO has delegated authority of that heads, and it did not come by council at all. So we didn't cite that or have an understanding of it until we asked. And that's okay. We've since seen that heads, and it all fits in well. So my suggested amendment, because the next stage that we are coming to is actually a deed of agreement, which once again the CEO has delegated authority, I'd actually just like that deed of agreement shared with councillors. It doesn't even have to be through a council meeting. Maybe it just is shared with us by email so we have an understanding for it before it is actually signed. Is anybody interested in moving or seconding this amendment? I'm happy to move it. Is there someone interested in seconding the amendment? You're happy to second it? Thank you, Councillor Powell. So the recommendation would read that the Sedan Street Public Realm Concept Design Attachment 1 is endorsed to progress to detailed design and future consideration by Council, which includes sharing the deed of agreement with councillors before it is signed. I don't believe this necessarily holds anything up. As I said, it doesn't even have to come to council. It can come to us by email, but just so we have an understanding of the deed, because the deed obviously is the final commitment with with the other stakeholders. We've got some questions and comments. Sure, Councillor Mansfield.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to ask a question, if I could, in relation to the amendment. Given that we've just sort of seen it, I was wondering if we might be able to get through you some feedback from the staff or the CEO, just in relation to that amendment.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Thank you for the question, Councillor. The way it's worded, the first time I've just read it, it would not be prohibitive in terms of it doesn't say council, it doesn't require me to bring it to council, so it's to share it with councillors. So I think that could adequately be catered for and wouldn't not necessarily hold up any process. Ultimately, depends on what happens after that, but it doesn't inhibit the work that would proceed.
Thank you, Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Presiding Member. And through you, opposed to the CEO, it was my understanding that the deed of agreement or the final agreement would actually be brought to council. That's been my understanding the whole time. So therefore, it would necessarily be shared with councillors before, so we can resolve to enter into that agreement. Is that the case? Thanks.
If I can, through the Chair, that was, yes, certainly my understanding. So the next stage would be council resolving to the final detailed design, which would incorporate the deed of agreement as to how to proceed. But there's a few other matters that would want to be dealt with through that process. So there certainly would be good engagement with council prior to a council meeting. But all I'm suggesting is that information could easily be done as well. In terms of providing the final deed of agreement to councillors before it's signed.
I think Councillor Nash, did you have a comment or question?
More a point of order as to whether whether it's appropriate that the presiding member bring their own amendment to a motion. So I'm just questioning whether that's in the spirit of our local procedures law.
It's certainly been done before, but I'll refer to governance for you.
Sorry, through you, presiding member. I think it's under 610, and a minor amendment can be moved from the floor at a meeting if it provides clarity or further clarity to the motion that's under consideration. The only requirement is someone that hasn't spoken to the motion in terms of moving the amendment, and I think the Deputy Mayor acting hadn't spoken, so is entitled to move an amendment or put it to the floor, and I think she asked if anyone was prepared to move it for her, and then failing that she moved the amendment and got a seconder according to the meeting procedures local law.
Any more questions? Thank you.
The follow-up would be whether the amendment is actually in the spirit of the motion itself, because the motion's about endorsing progressing to detailed design. The deed of agreement is essentially about the relationship between Subiaco 1 and the council in relation to the conditions that have been, as I understand it, the conditions that have been added to the approvals. I don't necessarily see the connection between the motion that we're recommending and the motion that we see before us and the amendment that's put up. Can I seek some governance?
If I could, through the chair, it relates to the Sedan Street public realm, the concept design, and it's structured in a way of a future action, giving guidance to the CEO. It would be up for council to decide whether it's appropriate to include or not.
Thank you, Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, presiding member, and through you. I just want to make sure that agreeing to that amendment does not somehow preclude or affect the final agreement, the draft final agreement being brought to council for approval. I just want to make sure that that would be the case. Thank you.
If I could, through the chair, thank you. Look, the intention would be in the future, so I don't think it precludes it, because ultimately council needed to sign off on the final detailed design, and that would then facilitate the ability to either go out to tender or procure the actual physical construction, which may occur at the same council meeting. So there's a bit of water, I suppose, to flow under the bridge, but I don't think that in any way stops that coming to council.
Just a question through you, please, Deputy Mayor. I'm just trying to understand whether the deed of agreement is going to come to council in any event, whether we pass the amendment or not. I'm really just after the CEO's advice on that. Thank you.
If I could, through the chair, I suppose that's a matter for council. As I've indicated, it's providing some instruction, but the intention was that the deed of agreement, together with the detailed design, would come before council. But ultimately, if council wish to add this or not, that's council's decision.
Can I ask a question? Because there's obviously confusion now in the gallery. Some believe that it doesn't seem to fit with this. Other councillors assumed that the deed of agreement was already implied, that it would be coming through the progress of the design, detailed design. Now, CEO, you're saying that it was coming anyway. Why didn't it say that in the motion? Thank you, Director.
Thank you. And through you, presiding member. It is our intention that the progression of the detailed design would occur through strategic workshops in the first instance with elected members and discussions with Blackburn as well. Given our delegations and signing deeds and the monetary value attached, this in any event is likely going to be coming back to council, and the intention was always to bring the detailed design and the deed of agreement back to council for consideration. Now, I understand in the gallery now there might be some confusion that these words may preclude that, but I'd hazard a guess to say that our delegations and the financial implications would still require us to take the deed of agreement back to council in any event.
Thank you. I have another question. Can I ask why the heads of agreement never came to council, not the words, or and even after it was signed, why it didn't come to council until we actually asked for it? Through you, through me, through you. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member, the council passed a resolution in December 2020 authorising the CEO to enter into a heads of agreement. So in entering into that heads of agreement, it was consistent with the report that went to council and the resolution that was passed by council. It contained mainly operational matters, which has led us to this point. So it didn't need to, because the resolution actually asked for the council, for the CEO to enter into a heads of agreement on terms of that report and that resolution.
Just for further clarity, thank you, because, and maybe my memory's not serving me well, I thought that resolution also allowed the CEO to progress with the deeds of agreement when it was appropriate under delegated authority, and it didn't have to come to council. Am I correct in that assumption?
Perhaps while we're getting the answer to that question, in terms, for those not sure what a heads of agreement is, essentially there's two conditions that relate to this, and one is the actual construction and the contribution towards the construction of the hard infrastructure and soft infrastructure on Sedan Street, and the other relates to a condition for the markets. And so the heads of agreement deal with operationalising how we would work together to be able to progress the Sedan Street design, but ultimately it's still up to the applicant to be able to deliver on that condition in terms of the completion of that, and they rely on us to work with them on that. So essentially the heads of agreement was operationalising how we would progress that particular piece of work.
Thank you. And in relation to the council resolution, it's relating to the heads of the agreement. So council authorises the CEO to enter into an agreement on terms consistent with the matters outlined in the report under the heading heads of agreement, and for council to authorise the CEO to execute any other documents to give effect to that resolution, that motion. As that resolution and motion relates to the heads of agreement, it wouldn't then extend to a deed of agreement.
And the CEO does have the delegated authority for the deed of agreement. Thank you. Can you confirm that?
Thank you. And through presiding member, the likely value would exclude the CEO's delegated authority, so that would need to come to full council consideration.
Okay, now we're getting down to it, the nuts and bolts of it, aren't we? So thank you. So that probably goes to my misunderstanding of the implications and the value behind the deed of agreement, that it would go outside the CEO delegated authority and therefore would have to come by. So on that basis, I'm happy to withdraw the deed of agreement or vote it down. Withdraw my amendment or vote it down if the deed of agreement has to come to council. Sorry, just didn't understand that further legal clarity. Yeah. Are you happy to withdraw? Thank you, Councillor Powell. Thank you, Council. And we will progress with this motion. Are there any more questions or statements about this item? Okay, then I will put it to a vote. Oh, I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. Yes, you can close it. That can't be as long as last time.
Very, very quickly, look, thank you to all those who spoke in support. We've heard tonight not just from those councillors who support this very important piece of development for Subiaco, as I stressed earlier, but also importantly from a local business owner and from and on behalf of the landowner, all of whom support this and who recognise just how important it is. And I look forward to that commitment as this develops being fulfilled. I'll also point out, and Councillor Rowe made the point that there's about the timing of this, that there is an obligation to finish this at the same time as Subiaco 1 or before Subiaco 1 is opened. And I think that's a very important thing for all of us to bear in mind as we move forward, or those who will be on council in the next year. So I commend it to you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. We'll put this to the vote. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor De Vries. You are registered, and that has unanimously passed. Thank you. Moving on to C2, thank you. We have the agenda briefing forum and ordinary council meeting dates. Can I have a mover and a seconder for this item? I believe we also have an alternative by Councillor Jennings to C2. So do we have a mover or a seconder for this item? Otherwise, we will move on to the alternative. Okay, thank you. Do I have a Councillor Jennings? Would you like to present your alternative as first mover? And do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor De Vries. Councillor Jennings, would you like to speak to the item?
Yes, just briefly. Thank you, Presiding Member. Just for the benefit of anyone listening, this is an alternative that is basically has the effect of deferring C2, which was setting the agenda briefing forum dates and the ordinary council meeting dates for 2022. It effectively defers it to the next. Hang on, I'm not even looking at my right thing. It defers it to the November council meeting, and that gives the opportunity for the new council to have a say about the meeting dates. Other than that, I don't think there's anything controversial about that. I just note that in the past, from what I could see, after an election, council meeting dates for the following year are generally determined by the new council in usually November or December. So this would be consistent with that. And that's all I've got to say, I think. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor De Vries, would you like to add to the item?
Yeah, I think it's just pretty straightforward that this is something that came to us when we were first elected, and I think it's reasonable and fair that incoming councillors have an input on those meeting dates. So it's very easy to support something so sensible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor De Vries. Do I have any more for or against or questions on this item? I just have a comment to make. I'm quite happy with this alternative. I just wanted to raise what, basically for maybe the benefit of staff, what could be a conversation point in considering these meeting dates. And that was particularly, I'll just move 4.7 and 4.8 to speak to this item. I just noticed February gets really stacked with a big agenda. It wasn't too bad this year, but past years we've finished as late as 10 minutes to midnight. We've had a lot of elected members' motions. We've also had, it's also been a month of a special council meeting. I don't really know how we're going to get around that, but one meeting finished at like 10:30, the other one at 10 to 11 and so on. So I worry about the meeting being so late in February and whether it can come earlier in February, because it does seem to be getting stacked. But we can talk about that with the new council. Are there any more comments to this item? Yes, thank you, Councillor Jennings.
Actually, it's just a question, if I may. It did strike me, through you, presiding member, probably the CEO, it did strike me that, yes, the proposed dates as listed in the table here for next year's meetings, they're quite late, not all of them, but the May, June, July, August, September, they're all quite late in the month, and normally we've been having the meetings sort of in the third Tuesday, but that looks like they're going to the fourth Tuesday, some of those dates, and I just wondered why that was, just out of interest. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could, through the chair, thank you. Look, obviously we're trying to look at a range of factors, including Easter and those sorts of things as well. But ultimately, council could decide on the new. If your motion is progressed, it's a worthy conversation for the new council as to which is the more opportune time. We do have just probably the few ones that cause the greatest trouble in terms of coming before council, like the financials, month end, and those sorts of things. So, but other than that, it's certainly council determines when it's appropriate to meet, and us, the administration, need to organise ourselves appropriately around that.
Through you, presiding member, just to add to that, we had some issues this year and we actually had to get the council to adjust a couple of the months, the meeting times, I think around May and June, and one of those was to allow the annual budget to get through to council so it could be endorsed. Having it earlier made it virtually impossible to get through to council, so in the current year we had to adjust a couple of the dates during the year and re-advertise them. And that's why we've made the move to adjust them. But as Colin has indicated, is that we can discuss that further with council, and when it comes back, council can make the decision of when the days are.
Is council ready to put this to the vote? Thank you then. I put it to the vote. That vote has been carried unanimously 10-0. Thank you, councillors. We move on to item C3, the City of Subiaco Advisory Committees. Do I have a mover and a seconder for this item? Thank you, Councillor Jennings. You're moving. Thank you. Do I have a seconder for this item? Thank you, Councillor De Vries. Councillor Jennings, would you like to speak to the item?
I will speak to it, thank you, presiding member, but a little unusually I'm speaking against it. I'm speaking against it because I don't really understand why there's any need to change. I can't see the workloads any different whether we go to a working group or whether we stick with a committee structure. By sticking to the current or the status quo, I don't think we're depriving the future council of the ability to change to a working group if they wanted to, and when after the election. But I'm just not convinced by any of the arguments as to why we're even doing this. I can't see any efficiency. The argument that we've got a lot of work to do. Well, we've always had a lot of work to do, and I think actually the new council, unless a whole lot of black swan things come up, it's nowhere near the amount of work that this council has got through in the last 2 years with COVID and all the big things that we've had to deal with. So I'm not really that worried about a workload argument, or I'm not convinced by that. So anyway, I'm speaking against it. I'm speaking for the status quo, and largely because I don't think there's any convincing arguments in here as to why we need to change anything. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Jennings. Councillor De Vries, would you like to speak to the item?
Yes, this is an unusual one because as the seconder, I'm also not supporting the officer's report. I took a fair bit of time to think about why there was a need for any change, and having been the presiding member of one of the committees where there was active community involvement, opportunities for community voice and input from a wide range of outside interest groups, I found it to be a very effective mechanism for key stakeholders to be involved in the community. I understand some of the arguments are around the effectiveness of these committees. I'm sure there's always ways to improve any structure in any way in which they operate. So I do not support the officer's recommendation. I'm also like to consider some of the reasons that were given, and I don't think they're pivotal to the workings of a committee versus a working group, which is that we will be too busy. Frankly speaking, being busy is something I really enjoy, and I've actually thrived on the last 2 years as being a councillor. I've never been so busy in my entire life as I was during the COVID lockdown, the 2 meetings a month, the various strategic workshops and the Zoom meetings. It was a phenomenal learning curve. As to committees, I think they always function well because they're highly structured and give an opportunity for people to attend meetings where they know what's on the agenda and how they can participate. I love to look for ways to garner greater community involvement, and maybe as an opportunity for that, we can have something like working groups as a separate thing to committees, but I do not believe this is the right time for the discussion. I'd like to keep with the status quo, and I would like incoming council to have the opportunity at some point to consider the issues that were raised in this item, but I do believe this is the wrong time for that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor De Vries. I'm not sure understanding orders actually the second speaker can speak against it, but we'll let it go because we were all scurrying here to check that. But look, it's fine. We'll let it go, and good luck to that. Would anybody like to speak for the item? No? Okay. Well, Councillor Rowe, would you like to speak against the item as well?
Well, it's funny you should ask. We've got ourselves a bit of a thing going on here. Yeah, I thoroughly agree with the 2 former councillors here who spoke formally. Thank you for the way you expressed it, and in particular thinking that we don't need this. We absolutely don't need this. And to think that the Property and Investment Assets Committee was amongst this list, I find staggering, absolutely staggering. So I think that should always remain the way it is, as a separate committee and working with staff and advisors, expertise, coming in from outside as it's happened before. So thank you. I think that's the way, if I can flag what you do next year, that's what I would do.
Yes, Councillor Mansfield.
Again, I'm not really sure if I'm speaking for or against this motion. I mean, I feel a bit conflicted given that it's not going to affect me, but you know, it's going to affect the new council. I'm just sort of wondering, and maybe it's a question through you, Deputy Mayor, if this motion is endorsed and if this motion is not endorsed, is there provision for the new council to make any adjustments or fine-tune the committee structure should they want to going forward?
I'll refer it to the CEO, but just remind you there's also a alternative to this item that may help to clear all that up. But thank you, CEO.
So I understand the question that if this motion is defeated, then what would occur is that we would include, just in terms of operationalising that, we would then include these particular items as part of the special council meeting to nominate. Now that doesn't preclude a future council at some point in time deciding actually there's a better way and doing something different, but that would give a clear message to myself as a CEO in terms of preparing that agenda, that those particular committees are included in the agenda item for nominations.
Thank you, Councillor de Vries. Do you have a question? Thank you.
Yes, through you, Presiding Member. Indeed, I have a question for governance. When I first ran for the position on the DAKE, I recall that there were 2 councillors and only 1 position for, there were 2 positions and we needed to add an additional position, which we did so on the night. I'm assuming that that kind of decision could be made on the night, that perhaps if there's only 2 people nominating for a committee position, that they just reduce the committee positions down to 2. Is that correct? Because certainly it worked the other way, but governance, my memory might not be correct on that, but that's why Councillor Phelan and myself both ended up as on that, along with Mayor Taylor.
If I could, through the chair, ultimately council is able to alter or change the terms of reference as they see fit, essentially through a council resolution, so that all those things are possible. And what council may wish to consider in the future is particularly relating to quorums, because these committees require a quorum, and so you want to give some thought to that because you've got a formal structure, and so that would be appropriate for council to consider that.
Thank you, Councillor McMullen.
Just a question, and that is whether it would be possible to defer this in a way that doesn't require us to workshop it. I'm just not wrapped at the idea of workshopping a new model for working groups. I just think we can spend a lot of time in workshops that doesn't need to be spent, and what I'd like to see is that this is just deferred until after the elections. Is there a procedural way of doing that, or is the only option we're left with to vote this down and support Councillor Powell's alternative? Thank you.
If I could, through the chair, the way I understand the question is that if this is voted down, because that's what council are considering at the moment, and then essentially, as I said, we would include those in the agenda for the special council meeting. If this wasn't defeated, then there's, sorry, I'm trying to think that through. If it's voted down, it would, yeah, then go to the alternative rather, from Councillor Powell. So.
And then if that's voted down?
Yes.
Through you, Presiding Member. Also, I'd just add a comment that looking at the wording of the alternative, that workshop could provide guidance in terms of change to how we structure the committees and then bring them back. So you could discuss at that workshop amendments to the terms of reference, membership and everything, and then when you come back we could deal with it in that way. I think it's open enough that it's deferring the matter for consideration, but it's saying to do a workshop to on the future of advisory committees, which could be we continue them, these terms of reference and these memberships.
Are you happy, Councillor McMullen? Any more questions?
No, I think Mr Hawkins did a great job explaining the merits of the alternative we're about to hear about, so I think I'll just wait for that.
Thank you, Councillor de Vries.
Just through you, Presiding Member, again, just reflecting on the implication that we vote this down, we do not need then to vote for the alternate for their process to be continued. You know, it's not like the alternate is the only choice we have. The choice is to vote it down and the status quo will remain. Is that correct?
So if this is voted down, there seek to do the alternative. If that was voted down, then as I was describing earlier, I would put those items on the special council meeting for those to be appointed. So that's how I was jumping ahead of myself in terms of the description.
Councillors, are we ready to vote? Or Councillor Powell, you'd like to speak? Thank you.
Yes, look, I'm a little bit bemused by how the mover and seconder are both against the motion. Look, tonight is the last meeting of this council and we're in caretaker mood. And while advisory committees are a pretty dry subject, I don't think we're supposed to make major decisions which will impact the future of the council. And to me, this is such a decision. It delves into the heart of how councils operate, into the mechanisms of how this council interacts with its community representatives, the council processes and its transparency. Look, this is an important decision. And next week, around about this time, a new council will be sitting. About a third of those members will be newly elected. They will be among those called to serve on committees or working groups, and I think it's only fair that they should have a say in how this aspect of the council operates. By making this decision tonight, I think we are depriving them of that right. Look, there's no urgency to push this through tonight. There's no rush at all. There's no urgent committee meeting scheduled. There's ample time for this to be taken to a workshop. I'd like for all the elected members to be able to get together, meet each other in a semi-informal meeting and discuss their areas of interest. I'd like all to be briefed on the roles and functions of the various advisory committees, or maybe it's working groups. This is about inclusivity and equality of access to information. Ongoing councillors have served on various committees, so by and large they have a knowledge of how their own committee operated. And from my point of view, there's certainly room for improvement in some of those operations. But a working group or a workshop will provide the opportunity for all to have the same information, which is needed to make informed decisions. And incidentally, I don't think this should be just confined to the committees. I think all external appointments should first be brought to the workshop in an informal setting where the roles like whether it's Central Count, Central Zone, JDAP, WOLGA, WRNC, when these committees meet, how often they meet, their roles, their functions, basic information. In other words, I would like to see information before a decision. And I would like to see all elected members having equal access to that information. Look, and I remember my first council meeting a couple of years ago. I felt a bit like a bud in a spotlight recovering from a grinding election campaign and then all of a sudden being in a new role. Yeah, so an overload of new information, and I certainly would have liked time to draw breath, and there was no reason for that rush, really, none at all. So look, it's probably a good time to review and take a good look at the committee system, whether it functions in the best interest, how it's functioning, how it could be made better, whether working groups are the solution. And certainly the terms of reference will need to be reviewed for each committee if they are to continue. Now, I'm really speaking to the alternative. And that's just the point. Bringing it to a workshop doesn't end the committee system, nor does it reinforce it. It just gives us a chance to decide as a new council what's best. And in my view, that is the role of the new council. I don't think it's right for an outgoing council at its last meeting to prescribe how a new council should operate in regard to advisory committees. It's for the new council to carry that burden for its decision, so it's the right of the new council to decide. And that really is why I put the alternative forward.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Are we ready, Council, to put this to the vote? No, we have Councillor Jennings. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to make some closing remarks, if that's possible. Oh, is this... No, we're on the amendment. No, we're still on the major... Yes, okay. So the close it's getting, sorry. So may I do that, please? Thank you. Just to address a few of the things that Councillor Powell said, making a decision tonight to vote down the officer recommendation does not bind the future council as to how they operate in regards to committees and versus working groups. That is still open to councillors at that time, and either by way of an elected member's motion or with a cooperative CEO, we could ask him to bring something along to a meeting. And the other thing, I guess the this is an initiative that's been brought by staff to change something. So in terms of things being major policy or major items, I mean, the correct convention, in my view, would be to preserve the status quo, not to progress something like this, which is a major change. So that would be how I see that. And finally, new councillors, probably, particularly as one of the councillors elect, he's been on a committee, so he understands how committees work, and depending upon any mayor that's elected will have experience of committees, and of the two other candidates in the East Ward, one of them has been a councillor before. So I think depending on who gets elected, there's a pretty good understanding, pre-existing understanding of committees. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jennings. We'll now put that to the vote. Thank you. Okay, well, that item, no surprise, is not being carried, and it is 0 to 10. Thank you. So we now move to the alternative, Councillor Powell. Some alternative, and it is that the matter is deferred to a council meeting following a workshop with the newly elected council on the future of advisory committees. Councillor Powell, are you ready to move that item? And do I have a seconder for that item?
Yes, I'll move the item, thank you.
Okay, I'll move 4.7 and 4.8, and I will second Councillor Powell's item. Thank you, so at least we can have a discussion on it. So, Councillor Powell, would you like to talk to the item? Thank you.
Look, I think during the debate on the substantive motion, I fairly well made my point clear. I think it is right and correct that the new council decides this. It's it which will have to carry the load, and I think it's only fair and proper that we put this to a workshop so that it can be decided in that fashion. Okay, I really don't have a great deal more to offer.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Powell. As second speaker, I will first speak to the item. I believe this should actually up the future of the advisory committees, not maybe necessarily committees versus groups, but certainly the committees, their terms of reference and so on, should come to the new council as a discussion. It's true that many of the new councillors coming on board in the future have had their experience with committees, but perhaps what they're not aware of is how much these committees unravelled in the last 2 years. Whether that was mostly due to a lack of quorum, committees did not meet. We have got stern looks at me, but we actually did have a lot of committee meetings that were cancelled due to a lack of quorum. Now, what that possibly means, if you look at our terms of reference, we may well have too high an expectation of membership there. For example, we might, where there are normally 3 councillors on the Economic Committee, given we are a councillor going down to 8, 2 councillors may be a little bit more realistic. And what I'd like to be considered is whether we can have an alternate to those 2 councillors. So if somebody cannot make it, we've got a councillor who can step up to that role to ensure a quorum. The other things that I've noticed that have come unstuck in the past with our committees is a pretty confused disclosures of interest, where we've had disclosures of impartiality, where instead, for example, there should have been a disclosure of a financial interest. Now, I don't know how really to get around this, but perhaps in our terms of reference or our guidance or introduction to the committees, there needs to be a very clear set of guidelines in how we go about the committees so that we don't have this problem of conflicts of interest. Just looking at my notes, yes, I was confused whether DAC even had a terms of reference. It didn't seem to be attached to the minutes or agendas that I looked up, but apparently it does, and it's now in front of me. And also, I wasn't too sure actually why there was even a suggestion of the PAC meeting actually going to a working group model, given it doesn't involve community anyway. Why that can't stay as a committee and so on. But in any event, in front of us are 4 committees, the Audit Committee, the EBSAC, the DAC and the PAC Committee. We are now councillor of a future council of 8 members. That does spread us pretty thinly, and so I think it's a good idea to bring it to the new councillors first, because otherwise, come the next meeting, we swear in all the members and we really go straight to, I understand we're doing that in the same night, we go straight to people putting up their hands for the committees. We just fall straight into it. That was my thinking, and hence my support to Councillor Powell's alternative. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Just a quick question, and regarding the order of business at the forthcoming special council meetings after the election. My understanding, and I think I've read somewhere, but that may be a misapprehension, we'll be having 2 meetings, special council meetings, one on the Tuesday after the election and then one on the following Tuesday. And at the first special council meeting, we swear in, new councillors are sworn in, and the mayor and the deputy mayor is elected that night, I believe. And then the second council meeting is when we appoint to the committees or whatever. Thanks.
It's a good question.
If I could, through the chair. I suppose the intention was hopefully that those 2 matters could be dealt with at one special council meeting, and but ultimately the council will determine whether it wishes to have a second. But many councils would deal with all of those matters on the one night.
Through you, Presiding Member, this is a question and also a recollection. Just to refresh my memory, I remember receiving emails from the city when I was a standing candidate, and I certainly received a lot of information about possible things that I'd need to consider if I was elected. And as I recall, there was information provided about where on the website I could find the committees, which is on the website, by the way. All the terms of reference can be found for every committee on the website. Is that correct? Is my recollection correct that elected not possible candidates who may become elected members will be given that information prior to their election, or is it just post the election?
I can't talk about the past at the City of Subiaco, but maybe Director Hawkins may be able to. But essentially, there is usually information session that prospective councillors may go to, but following the election, there'll be a package, sizable package that you no doubt would have received as well, that contains all the information relating to assist, and then a conversation with each of those those prospective councillors, I suppose, prior to swearing in to assist them through that first special council meeting. But unless there's anything further you think I need to add, or okay.
Yeah, I'd like to speak against the alternate. I actually, in the spirit of wanting to include future councillors in making decisions, I'd even go so far as to actually wanting future councillors to make a decision about whether there was a decision to be made. And I think at this point, incoming councillors will be able to access the information that they need to make decisions. So I do hope that we can revisit this, because the incoming council will be the one to decide whether it brings it to a workshop, not this council. So I'd like to leave it altogether. I understand the spirit of it, that we don't want to put a burden of responsibility, but we did indeed change the number of councillors that can be elected, so that's part of what happened, but I'm sure there'll be ways around it that maybe we can change the terms of reference in a very simple way, and that's what I'd be opting for. Simplicity in ways that just get the job done, because as it's been pointed out, there is a lot that we will be doing. There's a lot of work. So let's not put more burden onto newly elected members to have more workshops. That would just be too onerous in my view. And I'm sure in a year's time, when they've sampled the wares, they will know better whether they want a workshop or not. But that's not for us to decide today, in my opinion. But thank you to Councillors Powell and Presiding Member Stroud for raising the many valid points about the rights of incoming members.
Would anybody else like to speak to this item? No? Okay, let's put it to a vote. Thank you, councillors. Sorry? No? Right of reply? No, there isn't a right of reply, an alternative. I don't think. Thank you, councillors. That has been lost, 3-7. Thank you, councillors. We're up to now agenda item 11, elected members' motions of which previous notice has been given. There are none. Agenda item 12, new business of an urgent nature approved by the person presiding or by decision of the meeting. There is none. Item 13, for the meeting to be closed to the public. The reason for this is we do have an elected motion, a member's motion on the agenda, and you can see the reasons. It's under section 5.232D, that the meeting will be closed to the public due to some legal advice that had been obtained. Can I please have a mover and a seconder to go behind closed doors? Thank you, Councillor Davis, and thank you, Councillor Mansfield. Can we please have a vote to go behind closed doors? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. And it's carried 9-0. Okay, thank you, Council. We are now back open to the public and re-recording, and it is my duty to read agenda item 13.1, which was a confidential item. It was about the legal advice on the JDAP decision and the update following Council resolution. And the recommendation is, which has been carried unanimously, that no further action is undertaken in regard to the Metro Inner North Joint Development Assessment Panel decision on the development application at number 97 to 101 Evan Street and 375 to 379 Railway Road, Shenton Park. Moving on to agenda item 14 and the closure of the meeting. I declare the City of Subiaco Ordinary Council meeting, our very last of this season, of the 12th of October 2021, closed at 7:06 p.m. Thank you, councillors, very much for your work, and all the best, as I said before, to departing councils.